All right, hello everyone. This is the OSS team April week 4 demo. Here's Chip showing some of the updates to the README.
All right, so we totally redid the README this week. If you just go to the main project page and scroll down, you can see there are actually words and things here. You can see what's passing and failing CI. We have dependencies to get you started. Then you can check out, build, and run the application. And then you have a first query here. And then we have a code of conduct to keep everyone behaving.
All right, very cool. All right, next up we have Nate showing off some of the bug fixes he's been working on this week. And I say fixes, but they're also new features, I guess.
Yeah, so I've prepared a handful of queries that show at a high level kind of the functionality, what's changed, and what works now. So previously, things like DB arrays and whatever anything that wasn't like an arrow supported type was breaking the table view. So that's fixed now. And it also works for things like dynamic classes. So in this case, I didn't define it to string, so you just get the default to string implementation there. I also fixed format and style columns. So here's a very simple query, just generating random data. I've got a decimal format on the I column and a color format on the timestamp column. And then I have a series of queries that are related to classes or dynamic classes. So previously, this part of this query would work. So I create a dynamic class, create an instance of it. I set the instance to the column. Aside from not displaying it here, it was technically still working. And then in this particular column, I'm referencing the variable, but via the column. So this didn't used to work because it didn't know what types were available in the scope of this formula column. Here's a similar example, but I've got a class that's basically nested and poking away to give you new instances of that class. So it's kind of like a factory method. So I've got the first part that's going in and calling the factory, and then I'm also going and grabbing that instance. So it's a little bit more complicated in terms of what's actually happening. And you can see that works as well. This is a bug that Jiangfeng reported, where basically, it's very similar, but working through the fields, you couldn't actually get access to this to the properties inside of here without things blowing up about not knowing what an A is. So that works. Also, I fixed a little bit of the behavior of when you happen to redefine a class. So I've got class A, I've created an instance of it, and then I redefine the class, and the structure is still the same as the first one, but you can see I've changed what that name is. And then I've got this query that's actually using the instance from that first iteration of the class. And in the past, it would get confused because this formula column would load the new class and not the class that actually mattered. So that works, and it's also a little bit resilient. For example, here I've got some version of class A. I'm kind of hiding it inside of this other class B, and I redefine it in a separate shell command. So I'm giving it a different name. I'm creating an instance of that new class. And then in this query, one column basically gets my factory method, and the other column gets this instance that I created. So they're to technically have references to two different A's inside of them. And then I create another column that actually uses both of them at the same time. So I don't know if this is a feature. I mean, it feels like a feature. Some might call it a bug because it can be difficult to tell that when this is okay versus not. So for example, I've got exactly the same query with a minor change to B. So this class B is exposing that class A. So now anything that you might use a B for may create an A. And so we actually end up getting an error. Well, so this is all right. So this is the first part. This is everything except for combining the two columns. So this still works. I can create a table where I've got the factory method that has an instance of a thing that can return an A, and I've got another column that can returns this other instance of A. And so this technically works, but it becomes an issue if you try to combine them. So now when I actually try to do this part of the query where I take the left side and the right side and just concatenate them together, it fails. So this is the same as what I did before, but because B could possibly expose this, and it's very difficult to tell that it's safe. We instead give a nice error. Oh, hey, look, it looks like you redefined this class. I see two instances of the class. In this case, it's because they're from two different class letters. In fact, it'll always be because they're from two different class letters. And it just gives you the hint. Basically, did you redefine it in your shell? And then it also works with condition filters. I'm showing because it uses technically a slightly different code path. So it was something that I thought about and double checking. And then I have one last trick to show you. So in the past, basically the export runnable would ignore if a export totally failed. So if I throw an error, it just has to be anything that isn't caught. Exports do catch most exceptions, but not errors. This also works if the LTM throws something. But basically, in my log over here, you can see that it was like, oh no, something bad happened. We got to shut down, and then it goes and closes all the session states, and eventually actually exits. And kill this. You'll see it doesn't try to kill the gRPC API anymore.
Yeah, we'll get a UI notification at some point, and so it actually disconnects from the UI as well. All right, very cool. All right, next we have Christian showing off some of the performance query changes he's been working on. Do it quick. You're muted, Christian.
Good. Hi. So we have here just a setup in Python with a couple of imports, the definition of one table, the definition of two chain operations on top of the original table, and some tables defined for the performance logging that essentially contains all the updates to everything that is happening. The new thing here is that you can actually get a set of 6 new tables, the one that you see in this last statement here. It gets as an argument the ID of the query. It happens to be that the long chain of operations here has ID 1. You can find that out from the update performance log table. And when you do that, these 6 tables show up, and you can find for that particular one details about the performance that are calculated by doing joins and aggregations over the whole history of the logs. Another small difference compared to what we have in Enterprise is we have a more uniform set of columns now that includes session ID for the process. We're not persisting this to this. These are memory tables at the moment, but eventually we are going to be persisting this so we can have multiple runs accumulated over a certain amount of time, and you can find one particular run referred by ID or the date that it happened, etc. Inside that run, there is an evaluation number, which is the ID that we passed here to the query update performance set function call. And the session essentially just assigns a unique evaluation number to each evaluated query in turn. So it uniquely identifies your particular query. And inside the query, when you have chain operations, like here we have a timetable, and then there is a where, and then there's a last by, there is an operation number. So perhaps the operation number for where is 1, the operation number for last by is 2. There is also particular pieces of the computation that are not shown here that have to do with compilation of the query. So you can see multiple operation numbers that are like more than the number of chain operations that you have. That's pretty much it.
All right, very cool. All right, next up we've got Devin. He's going to show some changes he's been making to help get data into the Docker containers. And you're muted, Devin. There you go.
Yep, cool. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so I'm in the process of trying to trial out some one-liners to basically download sample data into either a bind mount or a Docker volume. This first line up here is kind of where I'm at right now, where I've got a very small Docker image that's maybe 5 megabytes right now called copy scrabbled data, and that will actually kick off a process of downloading some data into the data volume or data bind map. So I've gone ahead and already ran that. One other thing I wanted to highlight is we've got an easy way to get some stats down here, the Docker stats command. And so we'll just be able to see our worker doing some stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and kick off this command to read this CSV file. I think there's a little bit of a convention that we want to establish here with sample and other data to try to make sure that we've got proper prefixes on some of our data. So we can see the worker here, it's using a lot of CPU and it's going up in its memory usage. And this is probably something we'll need to also make easy in the future, depending on different workloads that you might be running, different sample data sets that you might want to work against. The defaults that we present here might not be enough. So in this case, I've bumped up my memory limit so I could read this big file.
Yeah. How big is the Scrabble Games file?
It's 160 megabytes, I believe. So it's not that big, but I mean, you're bringing strings into Java. So hopefully it doesn't take too much longer, but anyways, that's the basic idea is, a one-liner to bring data in that we've kind of defined, and we can have samples for and examples. And then have a canonical path to reference that data from.
All right, very cool. All right, and then last up is me. So I've got just going to show that we've published the web client UI packages. So all these packages now, like the Code Studio, our icons, and grid utilities, and all these things, they're published onto npm.js, which is the default npm registry. So the enterprise side could pull these in now. So that's what we'll be working on next. Along with that, the web client UI repository, all our source code is public now. So that's on GitHub under our Deephaven organization. And I've also pulled it out of the Deephaven core repository, so it's just pulling in our published package. So now it's not taking up any of that build time there. So for everyone else as an OSS developer, I'm sure they love that. And that's it for me, and that's it from the OSS team. So thanks. Have a good weekend.